This is one of the greatest war museums in the world. The Imperial War Museum is huge. With more than 33 million items, everything from an 83-year-old warship to priceless vintage aircraft.
Oh, wow.
It's a place where an extraordinary range of specialists
So up here is where we keep all our samples of heads.
work with world-leading experts
Any object tells a story if you let it, about why we are where we are today.
to help tell some of the most important stories from our past.
Clark was the first black pilot for Britain ever.
Now, we've been given unprecedented access,
Quite nervous about today. I'm not sure if it's going to work as well as we want it to.
not only behind the scenes of this national institution,
This is the mothership for the museum.
but also to the unique world-class resource. 23,000 hours of rare film footage shot in the throes of war.
Gives us that gateway to understand what actually went on 100 years ago.
Which will help us bring to life the stories of the museum
Do you want to see where I was sitting? Yeah.
as they design state-of-the-art galleries,
Oh, wow. It seems quite bright.
Yeah, this is bright.
solve historical mysteries,
You can tell from the letter that he went over, knowing he was almost certain to be killed.
and preserve the most important objects from our past.
If we lose this, there's not another one in somebody's shed. So this is it.
All around the museum,
The general condition is good.
staff and experts are busy taking a closer look at some of the many different objects that have been donated.
Oh wow, that is small.
But these items can often arrive in desperate need of care.
We get material that's been stored all over the place. Attics, basements, which can be damp. They're not the best places to store things.
And to save them costs the museum millions of pounds a year. Not only are some of them over a century old, but often they've been ravaged by the brutality of war and left to rot for years before being rescued. It's then the job of the conservators, led by Head of Conservation John White, to rebuild them from the ground up.
My particular favourite aircraft in here is the museum's Mark III Swordfish.
Supremely agile and capable of taking off from the smallest carrier decks, the Swordfish was one of Britain's most effective weapons in the Battle of the Atlantic.
It's the only complete original Mark III Swordfish in the world. It holds a lot of relevance for me because I actually spent 7 years restoring it. But one of the things we like to do is restore everything back to its original condition using its original components.
Today, John and conservator Jeff Cousins are preparing to take on yet another restoration.
So there it is.
This Crusader II cruiser tank is one of only two in the world. The Crusader didn't see service beyond the Western Desert Campaign in North Africa during the Second World War, and virtually all were scrapped.
Right, that side, John.
This rare example was found in South Africa, having been left open to the elements.
There should be a hatch here that's on a sort of cantilever arrangement, but that's obviously missing. Don't know when in its life that got taken off, and obviously that allowed the water to get in. So we'll have a look down inside, if I can fit in. They're quite claustrophobic. The first ones of these had 5 crew.
Conditions in the desert were tough. Natural water supplies were almost non-existent. Half of each man's daily ration of 4.5 litres went for cooking and topping up the vehicle's radiators.
The gunner would have been in this position. This mount here was where his gun sight telescope would have gone. That piece there would have had some rubber on there so he could rest his head on it. Just through there is the driver's compartment.
The deeper he goes, the more problems he finds.
Yeah, you see the turret floor is quite crumbly. You can see the rust. We'll probably have to strip the whole of the compartment out and clean out all the flaky rust, and then we'll probably be sandblasting the interior to get back to solid metal.
For the museum to tell the stories of the men who lived and fought in the Western Desert, John and his team have to save this vehicle, but it won't be easy.
It's a major project. There's lots of pieces that are missing off of it, lots of pieces damaged. It is a wreck. It's been sitting outside for 60, 70 years. It will be a minimum 5-year project.
As John and Jeff make preparations to save this aging tank at Duxford. In IWM London, away from public view, teams of contractors and conservators are hard at work too, on a new multi-million-pound Holocaust gallery. In charge of this huge project is Holocaust curator James Bulgin.
We are very, very swiftly approaching the date that these galleries are scheduled to open. But we've got an awful lot to do between now and then. So you can see here it's starting to take shape, but there are no showcases in at the moment. There are no AV monitors in at the moment. Speakers are starting to go in, but we haven't tested the sound. We haven't tested the AV designs. We're still working on those at the moment elsewhere. And then, of course, once the showcases are in, then the mounts go in and then the objects go in. But there's a lot to do.
When complete, these new galleries will tell one of the most horrific stories ever told. How the Nazis' persecution of Jewish people led to the murder of around 6 million individuals by the end of the Second World War. James and his team have spent the last 6 years gathering people's stories from one of the most researched periods in living history.
Some scholars think there are about 4,000 new books a year written on the subject of the Holocaust. It's a huge amount. That means there's a huge amount of new research to reflect. So what we're trying to do here is to create a new set of Holocaust galleries that reflect the vast development in Holocaust history and research for a new audience.
The team has already begun installing objects, like this Belgian train carriage, the kind of which were used to transport Jewish prisoners to different camps across Germany, including concentration and death camps. While the carriage's size is sure to capture the visitor's attention, for James, the most important part is knowing the story behind it.
When I see an object like this, it impacts me more, because I know that every account I read, every piece of testimony I read, for example, one of the reasons we positioned it like this is so that you could understand the height of it, because of course, looking at that, you know, I think, well, getting down from that wouldn't be pleasant. But if there were people here screaming at me and there were dogs barking and people shouting and, you know, with whips and stuff, just screaming for me to get out, we know that people broke limbs coming down from these doors. And so it's sobering. It's a really sobering thing to be in front of, actually.
When complete, these galleries will display the possessions and personal accounts of hundreds of victims.
Sometimes people say, oh, but you must be used to all this now because you're around the subject so much and it must be something that you become numb to. And actually, that's not the case. I'd say it goes the other way, to be honest with you, that I've certainly found, and I know that the team have found, that the more that we work on the subject and the closer we get to it and the closer we get to the people that we're talking about, it gets a lot harder, actually. Because of the nature of the subject, everyone who works on this team is acutely aware of the responsibility that comes with a project like this. Every decision that we make has been made in the most thorough and considered and detailed and nuanced way possible. It's an important thing for the Imperial War Museum to open new Holocaust galleries, and it's a major moment in Holocaust history, this.
76 years after the end of the Second World War, the terrifying story of the Holocaust will soon pass from living memory.
And tragically, the survivor generation are passing on, and the nature of this history is beginning to change. And what we're doing with these galleries is a fundamentally new approach. It's really important that we're talking to not just survivors, but those related to those who didn't survive.
All across the museum sites, staff are hard at work. From curators checking uniforms before they go on display at IWM London,
That looks really great. I'm really, really pleased with that.
to the galleys of HMS Belfast, where the exhibitions team are recreating that fresh bread smell.
They're going to make moulds out of these, so the bread will be exactly the same size as these.
So massive loaves.
yeah.
Meanwhile, 200 miles away in IWM North in Manchester, visitors are walking amongst some of the most striking objects in the museum's collection. But not all artifacts are kept on open display. Around the atrium are huge glass showcases, each one meticulously researched and arranged by the curators to help tell some of the most powerful human stories. 20 years after IWM North opened to the public, senior curator Laura Clouting is redesigning the showcases of the First World War.
In each case, we've got a different theme. This one's about the war in the air. In the corner here, we've got the war at sea, which is how many people thought it would be won. And this big case, one of my favourites, all about the home front, all the efforts that were made in Britain to support the war effort. And at the end there, we've got a case about, well, how was the war won? How did they get wound up after 4 long years of bloody conflict?
Although these items are all unique, they've been on display for 10 years now, and it's up to Laura to find a fresh approach to this 100-year-old story.
This is quite a formidable job. We've got 6 cases here full of objects, and it isn't just a case of removing it all. There's some things in here I definitely still would want to keep on display too. For example, this one I really love. It's this army biscuit, and everybody's aware of that famous call of "Your king and country need you," which is written on the biscuit, but it follows up with quite a pithy line saying, "And this is how they feed you." It's quite sarcastic, because obviously army biscuits are not known for being terribly tasty.
Laura's starting with a case that contains items from the Western Front.
When we think about the First World War, really, that is probably the image that most people have of trenches, of those long, arduous battles such as the Somme.
The first day of the Battle of the Somme was Britain's bloodiest day of the war, with 57,000 casualties. Laura's challenge now is to find new stories to tell.
What are people doing when they're not fighting? What is life like for you on the Western Front when you are not at battle, when you're just trying to be comfortable, when you're just trying to endure those hours of boredom? Because it isn't just all about fighting being a soldier. There's lots of time away from the front line too. This is a big job to think about finding new material. The first thing I need to do is get into the stores, have a look at some objects, really get up close with some potential new content for some new stories.
As Laura begins her search in the stores at Duxford, on the other side of the historic airfield, a lorry carrying an eagerly awaited container from Germany has just arrived.
All right.
The acquisition of this precious cargo has been arranged by Holocaust curator Lauren Wilmot. For 3 years now, she's been working on finding one of the largest objects for the new Holocaust galleries.
What I have here is an image of a gentleman's house in the small town of Felten in Germany, not too far from Berlin.
While it may look relatively ordinary, this property has come from a very significant place.
His house was made from parts of a former barrack from a nearby camp in Felten.
Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its allies established more than 44,000 different camps.
From 1944 onwards, almost every German town or village had one of these camps. The conditions were horribly overcrowded, it was damp, it was cold, particularly in the winter months, it was filthy, it was unsanitary.
Knowing where the panels came from, it's hard to believe that anyone would have used them to build a home.
In post-war Germany, there was a massive housing shortage, so it was really a case of using whatever building materials you might find.
The fact that these panels were repurposed ensured their preservation, and has created a remarkable find for the museum.
There aren't many surviving barracks. I'm hugely proud that we've managed to acquire this item. It's the first time these pieces of barrack will ever have travelled outside of Germany, and it's the first time that any pieces of barrack will have been displayed in the UK.
After travelling 700 miles by land, the team waits to see what condition they're in.
Quite exciting to see them come in, nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time.
This is the conservation hangar, where some of the largest objects are brought for restoration.
Hold it there for a
Watch
minute.
your head
Watch
there.
your head. Object safety is the top priority. You want to avoid any sudden movements. Everything's very slowly, very carefully. Now watch your heads. Watch this corner. Okay. Just watch yourselves now. Watch that corner.
It's quite a nerve-wracking moment.
With only a few months until they're due to be displayed, Jenna is hoping their condition is good. But it's instantly clear this is going to be a much bigger conservation job than anticipated.
You've got the flaking paint, you can see really clearly all the way around here. You can see where it's been completely lost from the wood and then the existing sections that we'll need to secure down.
Having been exposed to the elements for over 80 years, getting it ready in time isn't going to be easy.
It's going to need a lot of work because most of the surface has flaking paint on it, and we would look to secure that down because we don't want it lost as it travels to London, as it's being installed. There is a lot of work to be done. Have to get cracking.
Back in IWM London, Holocaust curator James Bulgin is on site, checking in on progress.
Every time I enter the space, something's changed. A few months ago, this was empty. There's nothing here at all. And in the last few months, day on day and week on week, it's changing, it's changing.
James and his team have been working on the new galleries for 6 years, and they're finally starting to take shape.
This will have graphics from the 1936 Berlin Olympics in it, so it's moving really fast.
Before objects begin arriving in the coming weeks, James is researching what life was like for Jewish people living in Nazi Germany. He's invited Leslie Erbach to the museum. Leslie's grandfather, Leonard, lived with his wife Clara and his 3 girls in the German town of Bublitz in eastern Germany, where they ran a successful business.
What can you tell me about their life in Bublitz?
I can't emphasise enough how happy a life they had. My grandfather had a fantastic sense of humour and teased them. They were a very loving family. They lived across the road from where the shop was.
So, but they were very much a part of the local community, very central.
Yeah. They were a completely normal family. They adored their father. My grandfather called my mother my blue-eyed Eva.
You can really tell in all these pictures, he's always got a little glint in his eye.
Yeah.
He's got a real kind of a warmth about him.
Yeah. He had a great sense of humour. He loved to play jokes and tease them.
It's just really striking in this picture particularly that Leonard's standing there with his hands on their shoulders.
Yeah.
He's obviously a really proud dad, isn't he? That really comes through.
Yeah.
And this is your grandfather's military service.
Yes.
Leonard Voll, along with around 100,000 other Jewish men, had fought for his country in the First World War.
Again, another military man, but again, you see smiling, isn't he? And how did this amazing, happy life that they were living change when the Nazis came to power?
My mother talks about children spitting at them in the street, being ignored. In school, she had to sit on a separate bench to the other children, teachers not marking their work, taking no notice of them. And that was, my mother said that happened almost immediately.
Almost straight away?
Yeah.
Under the Nazi regime, lessons about race were introduced, which taught the Nazi doctrine that Jews weren't humans.
And what about with your grandfather's business?
Well, there was a boycott on the 1st of April. So gradually they started being boycotted by the farmers.
As anti-Jewish violence intensified across Germany, Austria and Czechoslovakia, many families began to flee. In 1938, England granted temporary refuge to around 10,000 children, mostly Jewish, including Leslie's mother and her aunt. It's the reason she's here today.
They have to make the decision to take their kids and to send them into another country, into the arms of strangers, to people they don't know, because they think that's going to be safer for them, which flies in the face of every single instinct that any parent has.
I think, like a lot of Jews who had thought things would get better, particularly my grandfather realised things were not going to get better because things got worse and they had to get them out.
And
they didn't want to.
Beggars belief, doesn't it? Did your mother or your aunt ever talk about the moment where they had to say goodbye to their parents at the station?
Yeah, a lot. And my aunt said she couldn't stop crying.
Leonard and Clara were unable to get out of Germany. And what happened to them?
Eventually?
Yeah.
They were deported to Auschwitz on the 19th of February 1943, and they were murdered on arrival the next day. And they were sent to the gas chambers.
Immediately?
Immediately, yeah.
This is just one of the 1.1 million stories of people killed at Auschwitz. Before he says goodbye, James has an important question for Leslie.
So, Leslie, we've had this idea for the galleries about taking photos, historic photos, and individuals from historic photos and printing them onto large glass structures in the galleries. And looking through your family photos, I think it'd be really fantastic to do that with Leonard.
I think it will be a really good idea.
It's something I'd really like to show you.
Yeah, I'd really like to see it, really how it will work.
So it's great to meet Leslie today and talk to her about what we're planning to do and to get her enthusiasm about our plans for the image of her grandfather, and actually to hear a bit more about her family history, because there's a completely different level of learning that you experience speaking to people to that which you get from reading books or reading accounts. I was really struck by the fact that he served for Germany in the First World War, and he served on the Eastern Front and the Western Front. So this is a man who put his life on the line for Germany. That really struck me, and I think it's something we really need to make sure that visitors understand and engage with. I was also really struck by what a loving father he was. In all of the pictures you look at, you can see him smiling and just protectively holding his daughters. You can see this is a man who really, really loved his kids and really loved his family life, and for whom his daughters were everything.
Each year, the museum welcomes hundreds of thousands of people to its historic airfield in Duxford, near Cambridge.
Doing some air shows here, seeing the public enjoy it, yeah, it's fantastic.
People of all ages flock to experience the sights and sounds of these priceless historic aircraft in action. But there are some museum visitors that are less welcome than others. To prevent these pesky trespassers from causing a potential plane crash, Watch Commander Neil Williams is heading out to clear the airfield of birds.
ATC Mobile would like to re-enter both active areas for the purposes of bird control.
Something needed on a daily basis.
ATC Mobile Tower, you can enter Cheesewall Grass.
Roger, enter the grass, ATC Mobile.
While modern jet aircraft could possibly survive a bird strike, for the vintage aircraft that live here, the outcome could be much worse.
If one of those aircraft was to have a bird strike, it could pose serious consequences for the occupants within the aircraft.
During the Second World War, to keep planes and pilots safe, certain airfields trialled the use of birds of prey as a deterrent. Today, however, Neil is using something that's far more modern.
This acoustic device has got alarm calls of different species of bird built into it. That produces a noise of a distressed bird of their type.
With only a small amount of success, Neil is forced to take matters into his own hands, quite literally.
It's probably the most effective form of the bird control that we've got is the waving of the arms. But lads and lasses don't really like doing it too much because it looks like a big bird.
But with 146 acres to cover, Alan needs to step things up a gear.
Yeah, just over there looks like a good selection of birds that I'd like to target with a rocket. Doctor Tower, ATC Mobile. We're clearing the hard, but we'll be operating on the grass runway now, Eva.
ATC Mobile, enter areas and enter active runways, reporting complete.
Roger, ATC Mobile, and we'll report when complete. I do feel the weight of the responsibility, especially as the airfield increases in its movements and we have larger amounts of visiting public.
This agricultural rocket is used by farmers to scare birds away from crops.
There's no birds left on the airfield now, so that's good. Yeah, Doctor Tower, Foxtrot 02, that's the bird, rocket launch complete. Many thanks, Eva. And Doctor Tower, that's ATC Mobile back at the tower base and bird run complete, and all free of birds.
With the airfield clear, the museum's historic aircraft are once again clear for takeoff. Back at IWM London, as the new showcases are being installed and the objects will soon begin arriving, a team of specialist contractors, led by exhibition manager Nora O'Donnell,
So this is the route. We're effectively here.
have assembled for an important task.
Hard right-hand turn.
After years of negotiation, one of the original posts from the notorious Nazi concentration camp, Auschwitz, is being loaned to IWM from Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum. Strung with razor-sharp electrified wire, these concentration camp fences would have been unscalable, but anyone caught getting too close to them would have been shot without warning.
Should be just like that.
Nora's team will use this scale replica to find the correct placement for this symbolic exhibit.
They're making it look easy today because it's an MDF model. So keeping as close to this as possible, but without obviously clipping this. But it's definitely not going to be like that on the day because we're going to have 300 kgs worth of real object with us. Right, on to stage 2. Some areas of the exhibition haven't been installed yet. So the guys who are moving the large object, they might think that there's heaps of space to turn around a corner, but actually there isn't because there's a showcase there or a plinth there, but it's not actually in the space yet. So that's why we're walking around with the plans. That's why we've got other contractors here as well, so that we can bear in mind what we will actually encounter when we bring the large object through. Down and around.
There's a plinth here.
No, there's a plinth there. Oh yeah, there's a plinth back there.
There's a plinth here.
Yeah. This is still a 70-year-old piece of concrete that was out in all weathers in the Polish countryside. So it's robust enough to travel, but it's not something you can just throw around. It is a very precious object. It is a fence post from Auschwitz. There aren't that many of them, and there are very, very few that are available for loan. So this is something we have to look after very, very carefully. So this, then, you've got the 2 big plinths, and we're putting it over there. So we can either go...
Is this in... We don't know whether this is...
That's in position, that's in position.
Okay, so we
But we've obviously got this in the road.
I think we go that away.
The team's biggest challenge will be positioning the post in front of the wooden segment related to the Sachsenhausen barracks that only recently arrived from Germany. Damaging it would be unthinkable.
I think the barrack segments will probably go in before this, which means you do have to factor in a very fragile object.
While there's still a lot to do, Nora can be confident that the post will fit on display when it finally arrives. Meanwhile, in the research room, Holocaust curator James Bulgin and the museum's graphic designer John Costa are searching through the few images that exist of Leslie's grandfather, Leonard Voll.
Through these series of really incredible images, we see sort of glimpses into his life.
As part of the new galleries, James wants to show what life was like in Germany when the Nazis came to power. He plans to use a photo of Leonard, printed life-size, onto a piece of glass.
It needs to be an image of him standing up, ideally. It needs to be an image of him front on, ideally. And most importantly, it needs to be an image of him looking directly forwards, because it's important that when we look at this image printed onto the glass, it's somebody who's standing there looking into the room, not looking to one side, and that's not going to be easy.
John is responsible for the reproduction of around 3,000 individual images within the exhibition. And there's one photo that James is hoping will fit the bill.
Got a stain down here. I can see a little bit of speckling in his hat. His left eye is a little bit faded out. I'll probably see that there are a lot of tiny little flaws that become very evident once it's blown up, 1,000% in size. It's human nature to zero in on someone's face immediately when you're seeing a gallery image, so spend extra time on the face and make sure that all the features are nice and crisp and there are no flaws in there.
In spite of the damage, James is determined to use this 100-year-old photo of Leonard.
We need to make it work, because that's the only thing that remains on the earth of some of these people. And now that we've committed to making sure that their name and their presence in the world has a place in this gallery, we have no choice but to see that through. And that's what we're going to have to do as part of this process, and that's a challenge.
So vast is the IWM's collection that 99% of the objects they hold aren't on display.
It's padded to support that torso and the shape of the garment.
Instead, they're kept here, in the IWM stores.
Just about anything is here. I mean, you could open a box at random and you just don't know what you'll actually find.
A treasure trove of over 33 million items, including 23,000 hours of moving images and around 11 million photographs. This unrivaled collection is where the curators start when they're planning a new exhibition.
It's kind of what curators live for, getting access, getting our hands on the material.
At Duxford today, senior curator Laura Clouting is deep inside the museum's archives.
This is great. This is the bit of the job that is by far and away the best. This is the best bit.
She wants to tell the story of what men were doing in the trenches of the First World War when they weren't fighting. But to do that, she needs the right objects.
It's a difficult job because everything in here earns its keep in the sense of we've collected it for very compelling reasons, but I simply cannot have it all in this showcase. I'm going to have to make some really difficult choices.
It's the first time that Laura has seen any of these items in the flesh.
This is the bit of my job that I love best, actually getting to see these objects that up until this point I've looked at on a database. Oh gosh, this is a lot smaller than I realised it would be. This is set playing cards, miniature. Certainly is miniature. These are tiny. Oh wow. These would be used for some card games or even some gambling games. But I think what's brilliant is that you can just imagine, like, you're in the trenches, you've got to carry everything around with you. So, of course, if you're going to have a set of playing cards, they've got to be small.
Rest and relaxation were vital to maintaining the health and morale of the servicemen.
And I think an object like this really tells you something about the fact that men had to really dig deep in moments when they weren't fighting, when they were a bit bored, when they were just sitting around together, living together. They never got a minute away from each other. And so to fill some of those drearier times, a set of playing cards like this would certainly probably do the trick.
Though games would have come as a temporary distraction to life in the trench, there was one item that was less of a luxury and more of a necessity.
So here we've got a full set of wartime cigarettes.
Smoking was widespread during the First World War, and cigarettes were issued as part of the standard rations.
So not only does this show you perfectly the kind of quantities of cigarettes carried by an ordinary soldier, we know who this belonged to. So this can help to tell a very personal story. For IWM North, it's quite good because this was a soldier, Private Albert Tattersall, who was from Manchester. And he unfortunately didn't survive the war. He died of his wounds while he was stretcher bearing. These were returned to his family after his death, perfectly preserved.
Cigarettes were seen as a simple and familiar pleasure that helped calm the nerves and boost morale, making life at the front line more tolerable.
And it was a huge thing at this time. Soldiers lived in a fog of smoke in the trenches. Oh, so this object, I mean, I think this is amazing. It's a small pocket Bible that you could carry around. It was in the pocket of an individual, and you can see the violence with which it's been struck by a piece of shrapnel.
World War I was a war of artillery, with high explosive and shrapnel shells causing around 60% of all battlefield casualties. But some men were lucky.
This Bible saved his life. And just what an incredible thing to witness, to give you a sense of the dangers faced by the ordinary soldier out in the open air. This stuff flying around their heads. And thankfully, in this case, this Bible has come in very handy for this individual. We tell a lot of stories about what it's like to fight, to endure fighting. But this is all about what do you do when you're not fighting. It's about boredom with the playing cards. It's about comfort with the cigarettes. With the pocket Bible, that tells you a story about the threat to life from shrapnel and artillery, but it also tells you a story about belief. This combination brings to life some of the stresses, some of the strains, and actually some of the fun of trench life.
With hundreds of items left to find in a collection of many thousands, Laura still has a long way to go. As the search continues at Duxford, meanwhile, in IWM London, curators are working flat out to finish the new galleries, and graphic designer John Costa is trying to save one of the few images that still exists of Leonard Vole.
You can see that a lot of the flaws that were not necessarily visible with the naked eye are now magnified with white scratches, little specks, and his eye is a little bit faded here. When you view an image like this in a gallery, your eye is immediately going to be drawn to the damage and not the content.
Tackling each individual flaw one at a time, John has successfully restored this image, ready to be printed 6 feet tall.
I think the end result is going to be quite nice. I think it's working out quite nicely.
In Duxford, in the museum's conservation labs, conservator Jenna Taylor is busy testing different glues, ready to start work on her newest acquisition.
This is the first time that this object has been treated by a conservator.
This wooden panel was once part of larger barracks in a sub-camp of the Nazi concentration camp, Sachsenhausen. It's the only one of its kind outside Germany and is due to go on display in less than 6 weeks.
You can see the red-brown on top of the cotton wool there.
By testing to see how different solvents react with samples of the original paint, she's hoping to find a glue that won't risk damaging the panels.
We don't want something that's just a quick fix that actually is going to start failing when the object's in display. That would be quite a big job to fix and to get the panels off display again. So we really want something that's for the long term now, and putting this effort in now is going to really pay back. It is coming off a little bit onto the swab, but not as much. It can seem overwhelming, but also it's quite exciting to think about what we can do to help change that and help get the panels on display for the public.
Having come up with a plan, Jenna is ready to get to work.
So what we can see on this panel is just how degraded the paint actually is from being outside for so long. You can see that it's lifting here away from the woodwork, it's become brittle, and it's actually forced itself into that position and become stiff. So there's no movement in the paint. This is original and it's what we want to keep.
Using a very fine heat gun, Jenna's hoping to bend the paint and stick it down.
You can feel the difference that the heat makes, because if it's not heated, it makes a scary cracking noise, whereas if it is heated, it's nice and supple. So having relaxed the paint, I'm just now applying the adhesive to the wood. So I'm trying to be as neat as possible because we don't want the adhesive to spill out when the paint is put back down. It's very delicate. You have to have good hand skills and also a lot of patience. So I'm just going to gently apply the heat along the paint flake. You can see it's just gently easing it down rather than snapping it down onto the surface.
Moving just a millimetre each time, Jenna's plan to reverse the damage seems to be working.
It does take patience and it takes ease. You just need to go at the rate that the paint wants you to go at. To actually see it working and coming together is really rewarding. It's just quite a large task to do all of this over 4 panels, but I'll get there.
Back in IWM London, the new Holocaust gallery is nearing completion. But before it opens to the public, 2 very special guests have been invited in. Leslie Urbach has brought older brother Peter to see how the small image of their grandfather, who was murdered at Auschwitz, will feature in the gallery.
The last time that Peter and Leslie saw this photograph, it was just a small image amongst a load of other photographs, and today they're going to see it life-size in front of them, and I really hope they like it, because if they don't like it, I don't know what we're going to do.
This is such an amazing photograph. It's very moving.
He looks so proud. It's a beautiful image.
So, obviously you never got to meet Leonard. Is it a different perspective on him, seeing him eye to eye like this in a space?
He really stands out. He's very real to me now. He really looks very much like our mother. The eyes are just like our mother's. He looks like the grandfather we never had.
I know that our mother would have been delighted to see her father like this. I'm very moved and delighted that it's going to play a role in helping visitors understand that those 6 million were all made up of individuals.
Yeah.
So easy to get lost in statistics.
With Peter and Leslie's blessing, Leonard's image, along with 3,800 others, will now go on display as a powerful reminder of the people who lived in pre-Nazi Germany.
You know, we're just delighted that the museum is using new techniques to tell these stories, and that our grandfather is part of that.
I think my mother would have been in tears to see that image. Yeah. I really do.
Leonard's story is just one of thousands of others included within these spaces.
As soon as I saw the look in their faces, my mind immediately went to all of the other people that we deal with in the galleries, and all these other individuals and their lives and their experiences, and the responsibility that we have towards them.
After 6 years of research and millions of pounds spent, this will be one of the most up-to-date and comprehensive galleries of its kind, with thousands of rare items, most of which have never been seen in the UK.
What we want, over and above anything else from people when they come to these spaces, is to leave the spaces thinking differently about the subject. I hope they do.